When we think of an enlightened being, many of us picture someone detached from the world, floating above earthly struggles. They are calm, serene, and perhaps even godlike. But if you dig deeper, you'll realize that this is often more of a myth than reality. In history, many great figures considered enlightened, such as the Buddha or the Taoist sages, never sought to become symbols or gods. Instead, they lived as human beings, real people who faced challenges, had desires, and experienced hardship just like the rest of us. But here's the twist. Society has a tendency to transform these individuals into larger-than-life figures. We build myths around them, attributing qualities like perfection or supernatural power to them. But were they truly perfect? The real question is, did their enlightenment make them transcend the human experience? Or did it simply allow them to live with it more consciously? One misconception that needs to be shattered is the idea that an enlightened person has no need for material things. That's simply not true. Whether they are monks, mystics, or philosophers, even the most enlightened people still need food, water, shelter, and rest. They are not immune to the basic needs of life. Enlightenment doesn't grant them immunity from the physical realm. It simply changes how they relate to it. Let's take a deeper look into the story of the Buddha, a vivid example of profound insight into the nature of life and the release from attachment. When he chose to leave the palace, it was not an act of rejection toward comfort, wealth, or the pleasures of the material world. He had lived amidst the pinnacle of luxury, surrounded by every favorable condition a human being could imagine: power, beauty, music, fine cuisine, affection, admiration. Yet even in the midst of all these things, he felt an inner emptiness, a longing that material pleasures could never truly satisfy. His decision to depart came from a deep awakening, a realization that all things in the world are impermanent. Luxury, youth, health, love, fame, all are subject to change, decline, and eventual disappearance. He did not leave out of hatred or contempt, but from the clear understanding that clinging to such things inevitably leads to suffering. He walked away in search of a path to liberation, not just for himself, but for all sentient beings. Enlightenment, as the Buddha demonstrated, does not mean literally abandoning everything. It means letting go of inner attachment. After attaining enlightenment, he did not isolate himself from the world. Instead, he traveled widely, teaching, sharing, and engaging with people from all walks of life, from kings to beggars. He carried a bowl to receive alms, not because he was incapable of supporting himself, but because that way of life expressed equality, non-discrimination, and served as a constant reminder to remain unattached to anything. A truly enlightened person, like the Buddha, is not controlled by money, fame, or power. They can live in the world, make use of its conveniences and resources, yet remain inwardly free. They do not see renunciation as a means to glorify themselves, nor do they view material wealth as impure or shameful. They simply live with clarity, perceiving the true nature of all phenomena, and are therefore no longer dominated by them. Thus, enlightenment does not require us to cut ourselves off from the material world. Instead, it teaches us how to live within it with an unattached heart. Like a lotus that rises from the mud yet remains unsoiled, the enlightened one lives in the world without being tainted by it. And that, perhaps, is the deepest expression of inner freedom. The most fundamental human emotions, such as hatred, desire, and fear, often govern our actions. Especially in moments of betrayal, pain, or facing death, people tend to react instinctively, with defensiveness, anger, or resentment. The story of Jesus is a powerful testament to the strength of a consciousness that has transcended the ego. He was not ruled by hatred, desire, or fear, even when confronted with betrayal, brutality, and death. In the most extreme of circumstances, betrayed by one of his closest disciples, condemned by the very people who once praised him, mocked, tortured, and ultimately crucified in a cruel and humiliating way, Jesus remained fully aware and awake. He did not allow negative emotions to control or dictate his actions. This does not mean that he did not feel pain. He surely did, both physically and emotionally, but he did not allow that pain to transform into hatred or a desire for revenge. While an ordinary person might easily lose faith, love, or fall into despair in the face of such overwhelming suffering, Jesus held firmly to love and forgiveness until his final breath. That is not only a sign of extraordinary courage, but also a clear expression of a soul completely united with God, pure, unconditional, and infinite love. Another common myth about enlightenment is the belief that an enlightened person never experiences so-called negative emotions: anger, sadness, frustration, or fear. This idea paints enlightenment as a state of perpetual calm and emotional neutrality, as if one becomes some kind of untouchable, emotionless being. But that's simply not true. Emotions are an inherent part of the human experience. They arise naturally in response to life's events, both joyful and painful. Enlightenment doesn't erase our humanity. It brings us into deeper, wiser relationship with it. What sets an enlightened person apart isn't the absence of emotion, but the quality of awareness they bring to it. Take anger, for instance. For most people, when anger arises, it grips the mind, clouds judgment, and often leads to impulsive or harmful actions. But in the case of an enlightened being, anger is still felt. It's not denied or repressed, but it's seen clearly without identification. They recognize it as a passing energy, something that does not define who they are. Rather than being consumed by the fire of the emotion, they witness it with equanimity, allowing it to rise and fall like a wave. In doing so, they maintain their freedom to choose how to respond, rather than being driven by reaction. This doesn't mean that enlightened individuals are cold or emotionally detached. On the contrary, they often feel emotions more fully, more intimately, because they are not resisting them. But their emotional depth is rooted in presence, not in personal drama. They can feel sadness without being drowned in sorrow, express anger without aggression, and experience joy without clinging. Their emotions flow through them like wind through an open window. Nothing sticks, nothing defines. This is what emotional freedom truly looks like. Not a life without emotion, but a life where emotion no longer has the power to control, distort, or dominate one's inner peace. It's not about rising above emotion, but about living in harmony with it, deeply feeling, yet not becoming lost in the feeling. And in that space of conscious response, rather than automatic reaction, true wisdom and compassion can emerge. In a society that constantly pushes us to achieve, acquire, and accumulate, the idea of an enlightened person who isn't driven by these external goals is revolutionary. Enlightenment isn't about rejecting the world or becoming an ethereal being who doesn't need food, shelter, or love. It's about living fully while being free from the attachments to these things. Take the example of someone who has all the wealth in the world. To most people, having wealth would mean power, status, and success. But to an enlightened person, money is just a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. They don't use money to measure their worth. Whether they have a mansion or they are living in a humble hut, it makes no difference to their inner peace. This kind of detachment from material possessions is often misunderstood. Some might assume that if a person is not driven by wealth, success, or ambition, they must be lazy, unmotivated, or disengaged from life. But this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, many enlightened individuals are among the most active and inspired contributors to the world around them. They often work tirelessly, not out of obligation or the pursuit of personal gain, but because their actions arise effortlessly from a deep sense of inner alignment and purpose. Their productivity is not rooted in striving, comparison, or the need to prove themselves. It is a natural extension of their being, a reflection of the stillness and clarity they carry within. Whether they are teaching, building, writing, healing, creating art, or serving others, what they do is not motivated by ego or the desire for recognition. Instead, it comes from a quiet joy, a sense of flow, and a willingness to be of service. Their work is not a means to an end. It is a form of presence, an offering, a way of participating fully in the dance of life. And because they are not attached to the outcome of their efforts, enlightened individuals are often more resilient, more open, and more creative. They can pour themselves into a task without fear of failure or craving for success. They can start again, change direction, or let go when the time is right, all without inner resistance. Their sense of fulfillment doesn't depend on applause or achievement, but on the sincerity and mindfulness they bring to whatever they do. So, far from being passive or complacent, enlightened people often live with great vitality. But their energy doesn't come from anxiety or ambition. It comes from inner freedom. And that freedom allows them to act with both purpose and peace. One of the most profound realizations of an enlightened person is their relationship with death. Most of us live in fear of death, constantly worried about our mortality, trying to extend our lives through achievements and possessions. But an enlightened being doesn't fear death. Why? Because they understand that death is just a transition, a part of the natural flow of life. Think about it. Death is often perceived as an end, but for someone who is enlightened, death is just another shift in the grand cycle of existence. They are not attached to their body, their identity, or their experiences. Therefore, they don't fear losing them. This isn't nihilism, it's a deep understanding of the impermanence of all things. So what does all of this mean for us? Enlightenment is often misunderstood as a state of blissful, perpetual happiness. We think that once we achieve enlightenment, we'll be forever free from suffering, sorrow, or struggle. But in reality, enlightenment isn't a fixed state. It's a deep understanding of life's transience. The true path to enlightenment isn't about accumulating knowledge or achieving a specific goal. It's about realizing that the search itself is what keeps us trapped. Enlightenment isn't a treasure to find. It's an awareness that has always been present. It's about letting go of the need to change or control anything and simply being with what is. The journey to enlightenment is a personal one. There is no set path, no formula for success. Everyone's experience will be different, and that's okay. What matters is the willingness to let go of attachments, illusions, and the idea that we need to become something different. Enlightenment isn't about becoming perfect. It's about seeing the perfection in what already is. In the end, we don't need to go anywhere to find enlightenment. It's always here, in the present moment, waiting for us to recognize it. And that recognition, that awareness, is the key to freedom. I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you think my content is valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps more people discover it. Thanks for watching, and I wish you and your family good health and peace. See you in the next video.